Ray sat in the corner of his small rented unit on station. K9. The walls were thin, the lights flickered with a tired glow, and the air carried a strange mechanical hum that never stopped. He stared at the floor, where a small crack had formed last week, now growing wider as if the station itself was slowly falling apart. Just like his life, his food pack was empty. His credit chip was drained, and there was no response from Earth. No rescue, no help, no promises, just silence. He looked up at the ceiling and let out a slow breath, trying to remember the last time he smiled. But the memory was too far gone too. Faded like old light lost in deep space. The room was more of a box than a home, barely big enough for the metal bed and the storage bin crammed with secondhand clothes. Ray's boots were worn out, his jacket had holes in it, and his stomach growled in protest as if demanding answers. He didn't have outside. The corridor was alive with alien voices humming, clicking, hissing. The station was run by the Varlic species creatures, with eyes like burning glass and hands that looked more like claws than fingers. They were powerful, dangerous, known across sectors for their control over trade and territory, and his landlady, Lura, was one of them. She wasn't like the others, though. Lura spoke in calm, measured tones, moved slowly like she had all the time in the galaxy. Her skin shimmered faintly with green and silver patterns that shifted as she moved, and her presence made most residents lower their heads and walk faster when she passed. But not Ray. He didn't know if it was courage or desperation, or maybe just the fact that he had nothing left to lose. But he never looked away when she stared at him, which she often did. That morning she had sent a message, a reminder glowing on his wall panel in sharp alien script, followed by the translation in basic trade language. Rent overdue again. It said, final notice, report to Unit 17 before sunset. Failure to comply will result in immediate eviction. Ray had seen many humans get thrown out of airlocks before. Most of them begged, pleaded, promised to pay next cycle, but Lura never listened. The station had no place for freeloaders and no patience for weakness yet. Somehow she had let him stay 2 cycles longer than she should have, and that puzzled him. He stood up, brushed dust from his pants, and walked out of his room. The corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel of steel and strange light. The walls pulsed faintly with the life of the station, and alien creatures passed by, barely noticing the lone human among them. When Ray reached Unit 17, the door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a room he had never entered before. It was larger than he expected, warm and filled with a strange smell like ozone mixed with something floral. The lights were dim and soft panels lined the walls, shifting color as if reacting to mood or thought. Lura sat in the center on a curved seat, her long limbs folded neatly, her gaze fixed on Ray like she had been waiting for him for a long time. You are late, she said, but her voice wasn't angry. It was curious, like she was observing him, like a scientist watching an experiment. Ray stepped inside, keeping his shoulders straight even though his legs felt weak. I don't have the credits, he said simply. She tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes glowing with soft light. I know. He waited for her to call the guards, to press a button to end his time on the station, but instead she rose slowly and walked around him, circling like a predator, or perhaps something else. You are stubborn, she said. You are slow to adapt, and your biology is inefficient, yet you are still here. Why? Because I don't give up, he replied. Lura stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable. Then you might be useful. Ray frowned. What do you mean? She motioned toward a small screen that lit up, showing a sector map with red blinking dots. Several of our enemies have begun moving against US. They do not expect humans to be involved. They see your kind as harmless and forgettable. But that makes you perfect for infiltration. Ray blinked. What infiltration? A mission, she said. Dangerous but rewarding. Complete it, and your debt is cleared. Fail and your life is forfeit, so either I die in space or I die trying. You may also survive, she said, and learn something along the way. Ray stared at her, trying to read her tone. Was this some twisted game or a test, or maybe something more? But he knew he didn't have many options, and deep inside a spark of something stirred, not hope, not yet, but maybe pride or defiance. Maybe something human. I'll do it, he said. But I'm not going in blind. Of course, she said. You will be briefed. You will Be equipped, but understand this, Ray. You are expendable. Everyone is, he answered with a shrug, but not everyone is willing to prove otherwise. She studied him in silence for a long moment, then smiled the first smile he had ever seen from her. It was not warm, but it was real. Report to the docking bay at second cycle, she said, and don't be late this time. Ray turned and walked out of the room, his mind racing, his heart pounding. He didn't know where this path would lead or if he'd even come back, but he knew one thing: whatever happened, he would face it on his feet with his eyes open. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe this was the beginning of something more. Maybe this was the moment where a broke human from a forgotten planet would show the galaxy what it meant to stand and fight, even when the world had given up on him. If he was going to go out, he would do it his way, because sometimes when you have nothing left, not even rent money, you find out what you're really made of, and sometimes, just sometimes, that's more than enough. Ray stood near the edge of the docking bay, his boots planted firmly on the cold floor, as the giant doors groaned open to reveal the preparation chamber. Everything looked new and unfamiliar. Metallic shapes, glowing panels, rows of alien gear, lined up like toys, meant for someone who knew how to use them. But Ray had never trained with high-tech armor or plasma knives. He had never piloted a ship larger than a single pod, and his hands knew more about wrench work than weapons. Yet here he was called to serve in a mission meant for spies or soldiers, or maybe just disposable tools. Lura appeared behind him, walking with the same calm control, her presence quiet but heavy, like distant thunder before a storm. She handed him a small device, thin and curved like a slice of glass. When he held it, it glowed to life and filled the air with holographic images. "This is where you are going," she said, pointing to a swirling cluster of lights. "This station belongs to the Skarn species. They trade in secrets. They collect voices, thoughts, memories. They store everything because knowledge is their weapon, and they are planning to strike against the Varlix." Ray listened carefully, his eyes locked on the projection. He didn't trust her, not even a little. But he knew she wasn't lying, because someone like her didn't need lies when power already gave her everything. "You want me to go there, and what? Spy on them?" "Yes," she said, "and cause confusion, break their systems, remove something valuable, or plant something deadly. Whatever works, you will be given tools, but you must decide how to use them." Ray raised his eyes to hers. "What makes you think I can pull this off?" She didn't blink. "You survived here longer than any other human. You speak carefully, you think quickly, and you are not afraid of me. That makes you dangerous, and that is useful." He didn't know if that was a compliment or a warning, but it didn't matter anymore. "Happens if I succeed. You return debt cleared, your place secure, and if I fail." She looked at him for a moment, then said simply, "Then your problems end forever." Ray turned back to the equipment table and picked up a small device shaped like a coin. When he pressed it, it unfolded into a flexible lens which scanned his face and blinked green. He saw a pack of slim needles wrapped in soft cases, marked with symbols he couldn't read, and a thin blade no bigger than his palm. "These tools look advanced, but I still don't know what they do," he said. "You will learn on the way," she replied. "You adapt or you vanish." He didn't respond. He just gathered the gear and turned away, walking toward the small transport vessel parked at the far end of the hangar. It was built for stealth. No visible lights, no markings, just a dark wedge of metal waiting to vanish into the void. As he stepped into the cockpit, the seat adjusted to his frame, and the controls lit up with soft pulses. A mechanical voice spoke in trade language. "Destination confirmed. Launch when ready." Hesitated for a moment, his fingers hovering over the start pad. The weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him, but not as heavy as the weight of all the days he had spent being nothing. And now maybe he could be something more, even if just for one moment. Pressed the pad, the ship rose silently and slipped through the force field that separated the bay from open space. Ray leaned back as the stars stretched around him, and the station vanished behind shadows. He opened the navigation screen and studied the path ahead. A straight line into a hornet's nest filled with aliens who could read thoughts and erase identities, and he was going in with nothing but a few toys and his human stubbornness. The ship's system whispered instructions as it entered. Stealth mode slowing down near the outer rings of the target station. He was to land at an unused base, sneak into the lower maintenance levels, and work his way up, gathering whatever he could find, causing damage where possible, and avoiding attention until the final strike. As he approached the Skarn station, he felt the change immediately. The energy in the air was strange, thick like fog in his lungs. The walls pulsed with a low vibration that buzzed in his teeth, and the station itself was not made from metal like others. It was made from living material, grown, shaped, woven into smooth curves that shifted when touched. The door opened with a breath, not a hiss, and Ray stepped inside, ready to pretend to be something he was not. Moved through the dim corridors, using the lens to mimic the idea of a passing Skarn worker, his human face masked by light and reflection. The aliens didn't seem to notice him. They floated in silence, their heads round and featureless, their eyes hidden behind veils. They carried strange devices like spinning webs and walked as if they were underwater. Ray made his way to the center where the memory core was stored according to the data. The core collected everything spoken in the station and stored it in strands of light which could be replayed or destroyed. He reached the chamber and placed one of Lura's tools near the base, a device that began to glow softly, eating through the data like fire through paper. He watched as strands of memory dissolved into smoke and alarms failed to trigger. Because he had inserted a virus earlier, one of the needles contained a code that disrupted warning systems for exactly 4 minutes. Finished his work and began the escape, but something went wrong. A Skarn turned toward him, its head tilting as if sniffing him through the veil, and it reached out with a long hand that shimmered with colors. Ray moved quickly, punching the alien in the chest and spinning away, using the thin blade to cut through a wall covering, behind which he found an access tunnel. He ran through it, heart pounding, lungs burning, vision sharp. He wasn't thinking. He was just moving one step after another until he reached the hangar where his ship waited, still dark, still quiet. He jumped in and launched as the station roared behind him with confusion and broken silence. The ship's systems told him he was safe for now. Ray sat in the pilot seat, breathing hard, staring into the stars as the glow of the Skarn station faded behind him. Had done it somehow. He had gone in, walked among aliens who could erase minds, and came out with their secrets in flames. And now he was going back to face Lura, not as a tenant, not as a beggar, but as something different. Maybe this was more than a mission. Maybe this was a test to see what a human could do when cornered. Maybe this was the first time someone like him could rise above the dirt and show them what it meant to fight without armor, without implants, without mercy. Smiled to himself as the stars opened before him, because something inside him had changed, and there was no going back now. Ray sat in the pilot seat as the dark space moved around him like a vast ocean without a surface or a shore, his hands steady on the controls, but his mind spinning with what had just happened. The Skarn station still glowed in the distance, its core damaged its systems, blind its watchers, confused by what had entered and escaped without a trace. Ray knew they would search for answers, but they would find nothing because the human who walked among them had left no name, no code, no footprint. The ship was silent except for the hum of its engine and the faint voice of the navigation system counting down the minutes until return to Koga. Station K9, but Ray did not feel like someone going home. He felt like someone coming back from the edge of something deeper, something colder, like he had seen a part of the universe that wanted to erase him, and he had smiled back at it and walked away, still breathing. When he arrived, the station's docking bay looked the same. Flickering lights, same damp floor, same tall walls that echoed every sound. But something had shifted in him, and the air felt different. His steps were slow but sure as he made his way toward the central hub, where Lura always waited when something important needed to be said. He passed by other residents, some alien, some human. None of them looked him in the eye. Doors opened, and Lura stood waiting, her hands folded behind her back, her eyes focused on him like twin orbs of liquid metal. She did not speak at first, just watched him approach, like she was measuring his steps, his breath, his very thoughts. "You returned," she finally said, calm voice, same as ever. "You sound surprised." Ray answered, "Not surprised, just curious not many return from. The scarn and those who do often come back different. Maybe I'm different, good, she said. Then show me what you brought back. Ray held out the small device he had hidden in his jacket, one of the memory strands from the scarn core, still intact, glowing faintly with colors that shifted like smoke inside glass. Lura took it and examined it in silence, then placed it on a panel which opened and absorbed the strand light, filled the room with images, voices, thoughts, entire conversations flowing like one between two planets. This is valuable, she said. Your debt is erased. Your standing is changed. What does that mean? Ray asked. It means you are no longer a tenant. You are a tool. Ray stepped back slightly, his face calm, but his chest tight with anger. He had risked his life, walked into the heart of an alien data hive, and now he was just another tool for someone else to use. No, he said, not a tool. I want the truth now. Why did you choose me? Why humans? Why send us to do your dirty work? Lura stared at him, her face unreadable. Then slowly she walked to the edge of the room and touched a wall which melted into a window, showing the vast stretch of space. Beyond, stars blinking slow and steady like heartbeat signals from God's. Humans are not bound to patterns, she said. Most species adapt through order, through tradition, but humans adapt through failure, through chaos. They learn not by being perfect, but by refusing to stay broken. That is what makes you useful. That is what makes us dangerous. Ray added. Yes, she said that too. Ray looked at her now, not just as his landlady, not just as some powerful alien, but as someone who saw his people as a tool to win a war. He wanted to be angry, but inside he knew she was right. They did survive, did evolve faster than expected, and in places like this, out in the deep space where rules were made by the strong, humans had learned to bend and break and rebuild. He turned away from the window and looked her in the eye again. What now? Another mission? Another enemy? There are always enemies, she said, but your next mission will not be like the first. Now you must choose your role. Spy, assassin, messenger, or something new. Ray thought for a long moment. The idea of becoming what they wanted him to be left a sour taste in his mouth, but the idea of turning their power into his own, that tasted different, sharper. Real. Choose my own path, he said. Lura gave a small nod. Then you must prepare, because others will now see you as a threat, not just to them but to me, and threats are rarely allowed to live long. Let them try, Ray replied with quiet fire in his voice. That night in his room, Ray sat on his old bed, but the space felt smaller now, like it belonged to someone else. His thoughts were loud with new questions, new plans. He knew that something had changed between him and Lura, not just power, not just control, but something deeper. He had proven himself useful, and that meant he was visible, and being visible in places like this meant being hunted. He opened the small drawer beside his bed and pulled out the lens device, the one that had hidden him inside the scarn station. It still held copies of paths, maps, code lines, ideas he had stolen, not because he was told to, but because he knew they might help later. He stared into the glass, watching the soft glow shift into shapes, words, names he didn't understand yet, but knew he would someday, because now he was part of something larger, and he wasn't going to be silent anymore. Out in the corridor, voices echoed soft and fast, and above them, he could hear the hum of ships arriving, leaving, loading, unloading. Station was alive with secrets, but now one of those secrets had a human face. Ray smiled to himself, not because he had one, not because he was safe, but because he was still standing, still breathing, still choosing his own direction. And in a galaxy that thought humans were nothing, that choice was the first sign of rebellion. The stars beyond the window called to him, and he knew his mission had only just begun. Ray stood near the main station's energy core, where the deep throb of power pulsed through the floor like the heartbeat of a living machine. His eyes watched the movement of the engineers who walked around the room, checking systems, unaware that one of them was not who he seemed. He wore a utility suit that matched the others in color and pattern, but beneath the surface, his thoughts were far from mechanical. His mind was on fire, not with fear, but with purpose. He had listened to Lura's offer and had accepted her mission, not because he wanted to serve, but because he wanted to understand how deep the roots of control really went. She had made him into a pawn, but he had no interest in staying one. He had begun tracing her influence across the station. Every system, every shipment, every decision that passed through her fingers wrapped in silk and fire. While she spoke of balance and alliances, Ray found something else, something darker. He found human names on lists, people who had vanished after failing to pay or refusing orders. He found records of minds wiped clean and bodies sent back to Earth, marked as cargo, not as citizens. He found truth twisted into transactions. Ray knew then that Lura was not just trying to survive. She was building something dangerous, something meant to last, and he would not be part of it. He would not let humanity become a tool, crafted by foreign hands, sharpened by alien wars. He had made a choice. Began moving through the lower levels, again not as a spy, but as a ghost, learning the pulse of the station, the patterns of guards, the weak points in the power grid. He met with others, secretly workers, smugglers, forgotten ones, many of them human. Some not, but all tired of being silent. He told them what he knew, showed them. The data helped them understand that silence was not safety, and fear was not peace. Some walked away, but others stayed. Some offered weapons, some offered information. One even gave them access codes, stolen from a Varlix officer. Ray took them all, and used them not for destruction, but for preparation. He was not looking to burn the station. He was looking to break the illusion that ruled Ith. Planted devices in key systems, small things that would not go noticed until it was too late. Not bombs, but truth triggers. Programs that would release hidden records to every screen across the station. All the lies, all the disappearances, all the transactions made in shadows soon. Everyone would know, but truth alone was not enough. He needed to face Lura one more time. Not as a tenant, not as a tool, but as something new, something she did not expect. So he sent her a message, not polite, not coded. Just direct, meet me in the old control tower before the next cycle shift. He waited in the tower where old systems blinked. Slowly, where dust floated in still air and broken consoles lined the walls, the place had been abandoned years ago after a system crash, but now it would be the place where everything changed. Lura arrived alone, no guards, no weapons, just her steady steps and her calm eyes. She looked around the tower as if remembering something, then turned to him, her voice soft as ever. You called me here, Reyes, because this time I am not here to report. I am here to decide. You believe you have power now. Oh, I know I have something better choice. I choose to end this. Lura stepped forward slowly. And what will you do? Expose me? Kill me? Neither. I will offer you a deal the same way you once offered one to Mesh. Raised an eyebrow. Curious. Speak then. You let humans on this station live free. No more forced missions. No more hidden threats. Equal contracts, fair terms, and in return, we don't bring down everything you built. You think I fear your little uprising. No, I think you fear chaos, the kind that humans bring. When they are done being quiet, the kind that spreads and cannot be put back in a box once it begins. For a moment, she was silent, her eyes locked on his like two forces testing the space between them. Then slowly she nodded once. You are not the same as before, no, and neither is the station. He pressed a button on his wrist pad, and the screens in the tower lit up, showing the data, showing the recordings, showing the truth for anyone who would look. Lura's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with thought. Then she turned and looked out the broken glass toward the stars. Perhaps this place needs new rules. Perhaps humans are not as simple as we believed. Ray stepped beside her, looking out as well. Perhaps we are something you cannot shape. Perhaps we are something you must walk beside. Lura gave a slow breath. Then speak your terms. Ray looked at her face and saw not defeat but understanding. Equal rights for all workers, open records of all trades, protection for civilians, and no more silent removals. Ever, and in return, we keep the peace we help rebuild. And we bring others who want something better, not just survival, not just power, but something worth living for. Silence stretched between them, like a line being drawn not with weapons, but with words. And then slowly she extended her hand. Agreed. Ray took it, not because he trusted her fully, but because the first step to change was never safe. Never clean, never easy. He knew there would be more battles ahead, more shadows waiting, but for now, this moment mattered. He had walked into the station as someone desperate, someone forgotten, and now he stood as someone who could shape what came next, not for himself alone, but for everyone who had been used, who had been silent, and far beyond the blast. The stars kept watching, waiting. The days after the meeting passed in a strange kind of stillness, not the silence of fear, but the silence of waiting, of watching, of seeing what would rise from the dust of truth when the first message went. Live. When the screens on every floor of station K-9 began showing the hidden records, the faces of those lost, the voices of those who were silenced, something shifted across the station corridors, where no one used to look at each other now held glances longer than before. Doors that always remained shut now opened with quiet steps and cautious greetings. Walked through the central market, no longer hiding his face, no longer walking with the weight of debt or fear. Now he walked as someone who had paid more than rent. He walked as someone who had changed the story, not just for himself, but for every forgotten name that once echoed in the dark parts of the station. He was no longer just the man who couldn't pay. He was something the aliens did not have a word for, someone who stood back up when no one expected him to. The station guards no longer followed him. The officers of the Varlocks now moved with more care, their hands not always near their weapons, their eyes less certain, their orders now watched by the people who once obeyed without question. Ray had not built a war, he had started a question. A single burning question that now rested in the mind of every person on that station. What if we do not have to live like this? He returned to his old room one night when the lights were low and the halls were empty. The room still smelled the same. The floor still creaked in the same place. The ceiling still buzzed when the power core reached full cycle, but it felt smaller than before, not because it had changed, but because he had grown beyond it. This space had once been his cage. Now it was only a reminder of what he had survived. He sat down on the bed and looked at the old message panel still mounted on the wall, the final rent notice still saved in its memory. The same message that had once made his stomach twist now looked like a joke, like something written another lifetime. He tapped the screen and let it delete the message. The words vanished quietly, without protest, like they knew their time had passed. A knock came from the door, soft but deliberate. He opened it to find Lura standing there, her usual calm presence unchanged, but her eyes less sharp than before, more thoughtful. She stepped inside without asking and looked around the small room. Still here, she said. For now, Ray, answered she. Walked to the center of the room and turned to face him. The station is quiet today. Are thinking, he replied. That is new. Yes, thinking is the first step to becoming free. Lura studied him for a long moment, her voice steady as always. Do you still believe I am your enemy? Ray shook his head. I believe you were a part of something broken, but maybe now you want to build something different, perhaps. But it will not be easy. Nothing worth building ever. She nodded once, then handed him a new data chip. No commands, no threats. Just a line of access, a door to something not forced, but offered. This is an invitation, she said, not an order. There is a ship leaving soon. We'll go beyond this sector to places untouched by our wars, places where new stations will rise. I want you to be part of that. Why me? Ray asked, though he already sensed the answer. Because you see what others miss. You see the cracks before they break. You speak not just to be heard, but to be understood. And because people follow you now, not because you demand it, but because they believe you have walked where they walk. Ray took the chip and stared at it, then placed it gently on the table. I'll think about it. Do not wait too long. The galaxy does not pause for anyone. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door and looked back. Do you regret it? What you did know? Not a second of it. She gave a faint smile, then walked into the hallway, vanishing into the hum of the station. Once again, Ray stood in the middle of the room and looked around one last time, then reached under the bed and pulled out the old jacket. The one with holes, the one that reminded him of who he had been. He put it on not to hide, but to remember the fight, the fall, the rise. He walked out of the room not as a rebel, not as a tenant, not even as a hero, but as a human who had chosen not to give up. And Across the station, others followed his. Steps not with noise, not with fire, but with eyes open and hands ready to build something better in. The control tower, a new flag was placed, not a flag of a planet or a species, but a flag. Drawn by hand, stitched by many hands, simple in design, but powerful in meaning. It stood for freedom. It stood for unity. It stood for the right to stand and speak. Ray looked at it from the landing bay as the ship engines warmed behind him. His journey was not over, but he had already won the battle that mattered. The battle of being seen, of being heard, of refusing to vanish. Boarded the ship with a steady breath, no weight on his shoulders, no doubt in his heart, and as the vessel rose from station K-9, he looked back, once, only once, then turned forward, because the future was not behind him anymore. It waited out there in the stars. And this time he was not just another name in the dark. This time he was the light, the end.